We are back again with another video. Welcome everybody. And we're building another controller. The last one was a kind of a complete fail. It was a concept that was put together. It worked, except for that up button. That's a whole nother story. If you want to go check out that fail, go check out that fail. But right now, we are going to be building this controller. And we're going to get how we got to this state in a minute, because there was a lot of steps before this. But we have an array of things in front of me. So we have our Pi Zero. Or Zero Pi. It's a Brooks fighting board that has the Pi Pico built into it, which is the board we used last time. We're also going to be using Kali switches. These are Kali V2 switches. And we're also going to be using the Kali V1 switches, also again. And then we have a number of keycaps that are going on, along with a cable from StarTech. That's a B2B cable to hook it up. So that being said, let's get into all the steps, and we're gonna have to take a step backwards because we have to show you how we actually got to the finished painted shell we have here, because there was a lot of steps before that. So let's get into it. Again, everybody, this is going to be a 3D printed project. Been more than a few weeks now using the 3D printer. And this is now the final product of 6 prints that took about a little over about half a week, 4 days, something like that, to actually make. Now, after I got them off one by one, I kind of did a retrofit to see how well it would work, and it was kind of flimsy. So I went beyond what the creator intended, and we started to fuse them together. So I used a tried and true method I have used in the past, where you can pretty much create plastic, and you can create extremely strong bonds by using super glue and baking soda. In the end, and as you can see here, these are completely molded together. You can't see them on the outside. Obviously this is fabric on it, but as you can see in the video, you'll see we're completely joined together by that method. Then I started the painting process, and if you saw, I started with a basic primer of a gray, and I was going to go with a black, and I was actually going to, on the top, add a crackle medium on top of the blue, and then add another color to make it have a whole like crackled and rust effect. And then I took all that and threw it out the window because I thought of a whole new idea. So then we decided to paint the top with a copper color that looks like it comes from an industrial factory that's been sitting around for a while, which is like really, really, it's one of my favorite colors actually. And then I found this fabric. As you can see, we got the fabric, cut it to size, bam, it's on the controller. And as you can see, now it is, and it's actually pretty well adhered to the controller. I am not an upholsterer, so I am not great at folding corners, but it doesn't look that bad actually. So, that being said, everything has actually fit together. I did actually have to do a little extra sanding in the end before I actually clamped everything together, because there were some size differences here and there. And like I said in the last video, that can happen with 3D printing. They can be off by minor degrees, which can cause imperfections, especially when you're trying to fit 6 pieces back together into 1 or 2 pieces like this. So, and if you've noticed, so you're wondering probably, if you're gonna do this build, because the link will be below, of this build from Thingiverse, where are the screws? You don't see any screw holes. You can if you look really closely. There are screw holes. So what I did was actually put these screws in before I put the fabric on, and then put the fabric over it, and then punched little holes in the fabric, so just big enough to fit a screwdriver through, so I can tighten them down so those screws will never come out. So yeah. Now that is the process. It's dried, it's ready to go, it's ready to get some keycaps, it's ready to get the Zero Pi in there from Brooks, and then all the wiring. And then we're going to test it out, and we're going to be playing some Street Fighter 6. So let's get into the next step of this process of building this controller and getting it working. Okay everybody, just like any good recipe, you have to add some spice to it, and this spice is going to be some V1s and some V2s. And what we're going to do, we're going to add a pinch of them onto the controller, along with a pinch of V2s. And magically we have key switches. Just like that, it's that easy. So now we got to get into the other side of it, And we're going to be adding our Pi Pico. All right, as you can see, we have our Pi Pico, which goes right here. I already actually added the screws where this is going to be going, because it's going to be going right there. But before I actually even mount this thing in here, I want to get all the wires leading off of this thing. So let's go ahead and put this off to the side and get all our wires led into it. Unlike our last video, we're not committing the cardinal sin of using the same color for everything. We do have separate wires over here. We are going to be using white for the option buttons. That's the top, start, select, those kind of things, home button. We are going to be using green for all the K buttons. We are going to be using yellow for all the up, down, left, right buttons. And blue is going to be all for the P buttons. And obviously black is going to be ground. We have them already cut to length. They're quite longer than normal. But that's only so we can start soldering them and cut away the excess at the end. So let's get it attached to the Pico. Well, no, let's get attached to the Zero Pi. I'm calling it a Pico. It is a Pico, but it's a Zero Pi Brooks. So let's get that going. Okay, so as you can see, we have all our wires hooked into our Brooks fighting board. We're going to just mount it onto here for now. And then we're going to start running the wires. Okay, everybody, as you can see here, we have everything all soldered together. It's a way better soldering job than the last time, mostly because the solder actually worked. And I do recommend this solder. You can get it off Amazon. It's actually it's not that expensive. And it is a rosin core leaded solder. Works really well. And it doesn't need a crazy amount of heat either. So works out really well. Now, the only thing I'm going to do here, other than everything's working, I actually might tack these wires down a little bit more so they don't go anywhere with maybe some electrical tape or super glue. It's just basic cleanup, and then we're going to get into putting the last part together, which is we're going to be adding our StarTech B2B cable onto the other piece of the controller. It's a fairly cheap logistic kit. We can get off Amazon. That's where I got this one. And it's going to attach like right here. As you can see, we just got to remove 2 screws. Before we top everything off and test this controller out and flash the new firmware on there, we're going to add a little bit more spice. You know, some keycaps. They add some great spice to it. And boom, there we go. We have our switches on there. Now, let's plug it in and play some Street Fighter V. So one thing you want to do, you want to test this controller. You want to test all the buttons, make sure they're working. And the best way to do that, go to your control panel. All right, so you want to head over here to your control panel. Then go over here to devices and printers. Once you're in this screen, go to just the devices. This screen is going to show you everything connected to your computer. And as you can see, the Zero Pi is right there. Now, all you can do from this part is just remove it if you want, but we don't want to remove it, but we know it's connected. That's one good sign. That's one green light. So the next thing we want to do, we want to scroll down and go to more devices and printer settings. Now this will bring you to the classic menu most people know from Windows to look at your device menu. Okay, so we can see the 0Pi fighting board is right here. Right click on that and get a game controller settings. Once this comes up, go to properties. This will bring up a screen to test your controller to see if all the buttons are working. And as you can see, our buttons are working. So now we are on the clear and we can go play some Street Fighter 6. Okay. Why don't we go with Ken this time? Because he's the one that's kind of in some shit in this game. He's kind of been framed for a crime he possibly didn't commit. So, and he's kind of living as a hobo. But
you gotta do this. Come on. Hope you're not a sore loser. I don't want.
this game just looks so pretty. As you can see, the controller is working out quite well. I was able to pull off that match pretty well with this controller. It's a little bit different form factor than the smaller one I usually use, but so far it's working great. And if you haven't played Street Fighter 6, go check it out. So far I'm loving playing Street Fighter 6. Great game. Visually, it's just absolutely stunning, especially with the art style they chose to make this game. And I'm sure you'll see more of this game in future videos as we build and test out the controllers. But hope you like this controller. But now let's get into the final shots. Alright, so this controller is done. It was a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun using this controller actually just recently, playing some Street Fighter 6. Came out great. It was the first 3D printed controller that's fully functional and works, no hiccups. The paint job came out great as well. As you can see in our last video, the last one was a fail, but it was a prototype, and it was to see if I could really get a 3D controller working. It was to see if I can get a 3D printed controller working. And what the steps would be to really do that. And as we walked through the first one, we found out a lot of things, along with don't use crappy solder. Anyway, but this one came out really well. It was a smooth process. The controller is working. And if you want to make this controller yourself, the link will be below from Thingiverse. If you have a 3D printer, you can print it out yourself. It's 6 parts. You are going to require some sanding to make them fit properly, and I would recommend actually gluing the parts together, like I said. So stay tuned for the next video. We are going to be doing an upgrade video on the Ender 3, which is the printer I recently got a hold of. I know it's more than a few years old, but with a few upgrades, it's going to be a little better, which is decent, because you can upgrade it to infinity pretty much. But we're going to do some basic upgrades to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So be sure to subscribe for that video. And don't forget, check us out on social media, wherever we have a podcast every other week on technology and gaming. So until the next video.